everyone, welcome to Backstory Sessions. I'm your host Matt. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everybody, it's Kat, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Backstory Sessions. I'm joined today by my co-host, Matt. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Kat. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Well, indeed, we have a Halloween episode, I think.
Yeah, we do. Did you ever do any of the haunted house things when you were younger?
I did. My elementary school used to have one, Boston Elementary, and I was a bit scared of it, really, but not like terrified, just like it was not really my thing, but it was, I guess it was enough, like, not real seeming to be okay.
Yeah, a little campy, I guess.
Yeah. Now, my son, took him to a haunted, it was like a barn in a forest kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had to be just, he was terrified. So, yeah. So it was a lot more realistic. But, I just never, I see these like haunted forests and, different things like that. And this is just not, I love Halloween, like the candy and dressing up. I used to love trick-or-treating.
Right.
But this other part of it is not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I did all the trick-or-treating stuff when I was younger, and, when the kids were getting, they would go out trick-or-treating and stuff, and it was always fun. I don't remember if I told you this story. Maybe I did, but, and maybe it's in this episode. I don't remember because we recorded this a while ago, but, I lived in a town in Pennsylvania, in this one area of town where they would like close off the streets, and the kids would come out and trick or treat for a few hours or whatever, and like everybody came there. We would have 800 kids trick or treating at any given time. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. But that's one of the good memories of Halloween that I have. It was always fun doing it.
I mean, do you like haunted, do you seek out like haunted houses and things like that?
No, not really. I mean, they're fun to do every now and then, but I can't remember the last time I've been to one of those things.
Yeah. Even like movies, I don't know. It's just, some things are like just click with you and some things don't. And for me, those things don't. So.
Yeah. I guess for me as well. I mean, horror movies are, a lot of people love them and, like to be scared and, like the paranormal stuff and all that. But I'm not, it's okay. But, like, if I was going to sit down and watch a movie, it wouldn't be like Halloween or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I will say, though, this episode is Waverly Hills, and I am fascinated with it. Don't want to go there. Don't want to stay all night there. But I am fascinated because, it is one, historical. Like, that was a terrible time, when there was no cure, no treatments for tuberculosis. And I guess it's kind of like how people have felt with COVID and the pandemic. It was like,
yeah,
very little hope, and people were very sick, and it was widespread, and just so the historic aspect of like learning about that, and then learning of, like, on this episode we're going to have, I don't know exactly what we will learn from them, but they're their firsthand experiences. So,
Sure.
um, the one guest has only been there. This is the first time, and then the other one has like generations of family. So she has grown up hearing stories from the TB days.
Right. Yeah.
And now she currently lives there. So that's really two very different perspectives that I'm so excited just to hear about. I'm fascinated, definitely fascinated.
Yeah, I am too. So Waverly was a hospital at one point, I guess. And
Yeah.
the thing that interests me is when I was growing up, my mother worked at the psychiatric center it was like the New York State Psychiatric Center or whatever. And it was sort of the same thing where it was just this huge sprawling place, and at some point it closed and remained just an eyesore for the longest time, and then now I think it's being developed into a couple different things, a residential area and shops and things like that. And I always wonder if like that area is haunted somehow by the people who were there, and I guess Waverly is the same sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm a skeptic about a lot of things. I am a skeptic when it comes to paranormal things. But there was a quote from someone who was a listener
Hmm.
for Backstory Sessions, and his name is Russell. He said something that it resonates with me. He said that he'd seen and experienced too much to not believe, but he's also seen and debunked too much to not be skeptical. So I think that's perfect to where I am. I'm right on the fence of it is possible, but I'm yet skeptical.
Yeah, I'd say I am too. There are a lot of things that happen that just can't be explained. I mean, well, not easily explained.
Right.
People see, uh, a woman in, like white, like floating through an area or whatever. I mean, those kinds of things that I don't know what to make of them, But there are some things that I've seen that are just like, oh no, that, the window
I
was
mean,
open or whatever.
uh, if you were to see, the woman, for instance, floating through the air, I mean, at first I would think I was hallucinating. That, I mean, I would be concerned about myself if I saw that. Really, I'm
Yeah, what was
serious.
in my coffee?
Yeah. So, maybe you like, I hope that's the case. Like, you can turn off the contact or something. Like, maybe I don't have those experiences because I don't want them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they say that some people are more in tune with that sort of thing, like I don't know, the spirit world, or more in tune with paranormal things than others. I mean, I guess a lot of it depends on if you believe or not. Um, so
Yeah.
you might see something and be more apt to think it was paranormal, I guess.
Well, I mean, we've had a lot of guests, and many of them, report that they have seen or experienced something paranormal, and there's no reason to doubt those experiences. Um, it's just that for me personally, I just don't desire that. So
Well, nobody wants to see a ghost or be haunted or whatever.
I
So,
don't know. I mean, they're usually friendly, like ones that we
Casper,
hear about. They've been like, they might throw your keys or something like that, but
right?
they're not like, after you with a knife ready to kill you or something. They're not ghosts.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen, uh, I mean, some people are terrified by, they're terrified by what they see, and so I wouldn't say that all, hauntings are, friendly. I mean, I guess it's your interpretation of it, You'd be like, oh, yeah, that's my friendly ghost Michael or whatever.
Yeah,
And then others would be like, oh, I felt like I was, you know,
being choked to death or
yeah,
something.
yeah, something like that. So,
Yeah.
so I guess there's both kinds, but yeah, again, it comes down to what you believe, I think. So, and how open you
Well,
are to seeing something like
I'm just kind of hoping that if one does make contact with me, it's the friendly one. And
yeah, you hear that, Casper?
yes, that's right. Or Michael, or
Yeah.
whoever you're just putting that out there.
Right, yeah. All right, well, let's talk to our guests and find out what's going on at Waverly and what's been happening there. And, it should be an interesting episode.
Oh, I'm so fascinated. I can't wait to hear what they're going to say. So let's get to it.
All right.
Brian and Shirlene, I want to welcome you to Backstory Sessions. We are really excited to have both of you as our guests today as we talk about Waverly Hills.
Well, thank you very much. Looking forward to talking with you.
Thanks for having us.
Shirlene, your perspective really intrigues me because you've been at Waverly Hills in different capacities for 21 years, I think. And
Yes,
then, yeah, and then your family goes back to like many different time periods of this of Waverly Hills history. So, if you could just give us a little bit of backstory about you and your family, and the time that you have spent there.
sure. Well, I kind of grew up hearing stories about Waverly Hills as a child. Never paid attention to it. Couldn't have cared less. It was just a frequently used name around my house. When I got a little bit older, of course, I become curious and I took more interest in the place, if you will. I never did break in. Most of the neighbors around here, all the kids tried to break in between the time that it may have been empty for a period of time. I never did that. I was a good girl, so to speak. But I never did come up here until I actually had permission to come up here. But then about 2000, early 2002, late 2001, early 2002. I came up and got to meet people, and I just seemed to fit right in and was asked to be a tour guide, which I did. I did that for probably 14, 15 years, and I'm still here.
Wow. And so, Brian, I guess a question for you would be, at what point did you hear of Waverly Hills? Do you have a long history as well?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, and it was always a place that people talked about around Halloween, and I knew it to be one of the most haunted places, of course, in our city and in this region. And I had actually never been until last week, and I went, and they gave me one of the tours, and it was broad daylight. So not dark, none of the spooky time of day. It was 10 in the morning, and went on the tours. And as they take you through the floors, you can feel there were points in time where we were walking where it felt like my hair was standing up on my arms and on my back, and you could really feel something there. And so it was a really cool first experience. And outside of that being my first tour and just the stories that you hear growing up, that was my only background with Waverly Hills.
Were you expecting to feel anything since you took the daytime tour? Were you thinking like maybe that would, like there wouldn't be any killings at that time.
I honestly had no idea what to expect. I thought that it was going to be, I knew it was going to be something that I'd never experienced before, but I didn't expect to actually feel the way that I did, especially during the day. I think that was one of the most shocking parts about it. And just seeing the property and walking around in the different rooms on the different floors, even on the roof, you just get a strange sense, and they do such a good job of explaining things and explaining the history to you that you're taking all of these tidbits with you as you're turning corners and going through creaky doors. And it really is, for this time of year, it's got to be one of the best experiences.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, Shirlene. So that leads us into what is the history of Waverly Hills?
Okay, so many years ago, if we will, of course, the Waverly Hills that you see now standing here is not the first hospital that was built up here. The first much smaller building, even previous to that, the property was owned by a Colonel Major Hayes, and he was the owner of a large plot of property. Waverly at one time stood on about 600 acres. It had over 50 buildings on the property, everything from farmland to anything and everything. This was a community. This was a city. They built up here on this hill so they could get all the fresh air and sunlight possible. But even before they built this building, there was a much smaller building that they built. They started in 1910, and it opened in 1911, very, very small. But even predating that, going back further, it was owned by Mr. Hayes, and Mr. Hayes had a few daughters. He was pretty well off, and he decided that his children were traveling way too far to school. He had several kids, but his two girls had to travel pretty far to school every day, and he did not like that. So he decided to take his money and build a little schoolhouse here on the property at the time, and sent his two girls to that school. And at that time, there was not many houses out here other than the Waverly. Well, it wasn't even built yet. So it was very, very rural. And of course, that's why they chose this spot. And so he built a schoolhouse, and he hired a teacher. Her name was Lizzie Harris. And Mrs. Harris loved Waverly Scott novels so very much that he decided to call this up here Waverly Hills. And then when the need for the hospital came along, the first hospital, even before the first hospital, they treated people up here many years in tents. Now, I can't imagine these giant tents spread out over this property, and you're treating patients in this tent. And they did that before they even built the smaller hospital. Like I said, it was built in about 1910. And it got full very quickly. It was only supposed to hold about 50 patients, and it got to over 150. And they knew that this epidemic was not going anywhere soon. So they decided to break ground on this building, which they did in 1924, and it opened in 1926. And of course, the reason
tuberculosis primarily.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yes. It was probably one of its peak, at least here in Jefferson County in Kentucky. Kentucky had the highest rate of tuberculosis at that time than any other place in the United States. Now, there were other places that they tried because, again, there was no cure, and they would have done anything that they thought would help. They just didn't know what to do. So they tried a lot of experimental things. If you've ever heard of Mammoth Cave here in Kentucky, they even at one time kept people down in this dark, moist, damp cave because they thought that might be the cure for tuberculosis. And of course, we know now it wasn't. And neither was really sunlight and fresh air and good food, which is why they built this up so high. And the way that it's developed is so that it would catch all of the air that came here on this hilltop. So they built this one here, and that was for that reason.
So after there was a cure, or the cases were able to be treated, Were people like, or have you ever been afraid, like, okay, there's a lot of disease in here? How was that addressed so that it would be safe to enter?
Well, when when the owners bought the building, of course, they were told all of the asbestos, of course, had to be removed, which was done. As far as anything else, tuberculosis can only live so long outside of a host. And this place had been abandoned for a number of years. So that was never a threat of, catching tuberculosis from being here. That wasn't an option. So we didn't have to worry about that. But they did clean up all the asbestos and anything that could have been harmful.
Yeah. So after it was empty for a while, then how does it become a tourist attraction?
Well, Mr. and Miss Mattingly bought the property in about early 2001, and they was hoping to, use the building and generate funds. Of course, at that time, when they bought it, they didn't know it was haunted either. I mean, of course, everyone had rumors, and there had been rumors for many years. But they didn't know that either until they come upon the building and purchased it and started working up here. And then things started to happen and they realized we've got a lot more here than what we thought. So that's when they decided to start using it and let people come in and see for themselves just what is here. And over the years, there has been thousands come through this building. And many of those come back year after year. We've had people that's been coming for 21 years and wouldn't miss an opportunity to come up, sometimes even 2 and 3 times a year. So yeah, it's definitely an active spot for paranormal investigations.
So Brian, let me ask you, since that was your first visit, do you feel like that most of the people that come there are expecting something paranormal to happen, or are most people, would you say, skeptical that anything really exists in the paranormal sense there?
I think it depends. I think that a lot of people who are going there are hoping to see something or feel something and are trying to stoke that curiosity. When I was on the tour, I was with one of my colleagues and a photographer and a reporter from a local news station, and just going through there and watching their reactions in a group of 4 or 5 of us, if that's what my parameter to base it off of is, they were spooked the entire time. It was fun to watch. And I can tell you, I personally have a background in journalism, and after thousands of interviews and conversations with different people, you're almost trained to listen and watch in a different way. And so I was watching the staff and the tour guides and the people who work there when they would tell stories of different encounters and things they've witnessed over the years working there. And the way that they would tell the stories and the way that almost some of it was nonchalant. It wasn't a show. It wasn't trying to convince us of anything. It was just recounting what their day-to-day is like. And so for me to watch that and look at it through a different lens, I really personally got the sense that, man, if you come here, you better be ready for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I'm sure that's what drives people to come there, just wanting to see for themselves if anything really exists in the paranormal, or just the fascination with what the building would look like, what their day-to-day was like. This, like the feeling that you had, did you feel like that was, a ghost of someone who had TB and passed away there, or did you get any sense of like where the feeling was coming from?
It was almost just a feeling. It wasn't, I don't want to describe it as a negative feeling. And I think that was almost what was as cool for me as anything.
Exactly.
You just feel as if there is more around you than the people that you see. And so it wasn't some sort of negative Hollywood movie, you're running down the halls, things like that. It wasn't anything like that. You just feel this almost like a presence, and and again, not negative. And even some of the stories that the guides will share with you, they're not even, I want to say, scary or negative either. They're just interesting. And even some of the background on the people who were there or who had died there over the years, who they have stories about, even though they were sad to begin with, some of their encounters weren't. It was almost as if if there were spirits or whoever is there want to be included in what's going on.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it, because that is so true.
So, how did it become such a, I think this is like known worldwide, it seems.
Mm-hmm. We get people from all over the world that visit us. And going back to the skeptic, that come through here, we have had our share, trust me. And you're going to have some people that come up here with a no way possible attitude. And there's some that's going to leave with that attitude as well, of course. You have to be willing to be open. And if you're determined when you walk through these doors that nothing's going to happen, then more than likely you're not going to let nothing happen. But we have turned so many skeptics into believers. I have given so many tours when people have told me, when I came in here, I thought this was crazy. I thought I'm just going to go along with my husband or wife or whatever. They want to see it, so I'm willing to go with them. And before they would leave, they definitely have had some kind of encounter that made them feel otherwise.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How did the word spread like around the world? How did it become a thing?
Because like Brian was saying, we don't have to put on up here. We don't have to make up stories. There's so much that has happened in this building, and it is kind of like our day-to-day. People say, "Are you there now?" when they call me on the phone. Well, yeah, I said, yes, I am. I'm sitting right here. And they're all like, aren't you scared? And, scared is not the word. And I don't feel scared. Now, startled, that's another thing. You never get used to that. You never know what you may see or hear. So you're always kind of prepared. And when it happens, you're like, well, yep, there it goes again. But as far as scared, not to the point to where I'm like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I'm just scared to death. Because this was their home. Many of these people that died here loved it here. In fact, they loved it so very much that they had to be forced to leave once they had gotten well. When they did get a cure for tuberculosis and they was able to start giving people injections of streptomycin, then people were getting well, but they didn't want to leave. You have to know that some of these people came here as an infant. Better yet, some of these people were born here. So this was the only home they had ever known up until maybe they're 20 or 30 years old. And now all of a sudden they have no place to go. And you say, well, you're well, you can go home. They didn't want to leave. They truly loved this building. And because I did have family that worked here, my grandparents both worked here. My grandfather actually helped build the building. And then he became a butcher after it was open, and he worked in the kitchen. My grandmother worked in this very same room that I'm at now. This is the old laundry room, which has been converted now, but it's still a big old large brick room. And she worked here, and don't think I don't hear from her quite often as well. And then my dad was born and raised here, and at 14 they put him on the payroll, and he began to work in the body chute until he went off to war. And then, of course, I was born on the property as well, because if you worked at Waverly, you lived at Waverly. You did not go home to your family every night when you got off work. Instead, your family would come to visit you and usually wave at you from outside because they didn't want to catch this disease and they didn't want them coming inside. So yeah, if you worked here, you pretty much lived here. And a lot of them would bring their entire families. There was accommodations for their families as well, for the doctors and nurses and what have you. So we all lived here on the property. I was born here on the property as well, and I still live in one of the little doctor's houses down on East Pages, right at the bottom of the hill. So, but this was a very loved place. And because it wasn't, now I will tell you that after Waverly Hills closed in 1961, they opened the next year as Woodhaven Geriatric Center, and that was quite a different atmosphere. Unfortunately, it was like many nursing homes that are terribly understaffed. So the patients were left to their own demise, if you would say. A lot of people wasn't able to get up and go to the restroom. They would just do that in their bed, and they would lay there for hours and hours in this. They had the doors, a lot of the doors were cut in half, so they could lock the door that the person couldn't get out of the room, but they could see out of the room. So it was more of a neglectful, and I hate to say that because I don't think they set out to be neglectful, but because of the staffing problem, they were neglectful. And then there was a lot of people that passed away here during that time that maybe didn't have that same happy feeling that the previous people that were here did.
Sure. So you mentioned like being startled, perhaps more.
Oh yeah.
What are some things that like you've experienced that are,
Oh my goodness. There's been so many things, but some of the most memorable that I probably will never forget was I had only been here a few weeks, maybe a month or so, when I first started up here. And at that time, they didn't even have electricity in the building. This room wasn't even finished. It had trees growing up out of the roof where I'm sitting now. So it was in a pretty bad condition. And when I first started up here, my grandmother passed away very shortly after. And at that time, we didn't have an indoors to set in. We would do security or watch the building or do whatever needed to be done from out in our cars. And that's where I was at the time, was riding around the building. And all of a sudden, I seen a white dove. Well, something just told me that was my grandmother. And it just, still today, that's a memory I will never forget. But I also happened to look over at the building at the same time, and I saw a gentleman. And he was on the fourth floor. And I can still see him today. He had on like a blue, kind of like a Kentucky blue color, kind of like the shirt. And then he had like it seemed, what I remember is it was like a plaid hat that he had on his head. And just, you couldn't see below. I don't know if he had on jeans or what he had on, but because of the wall that goes around the building, I couldn't see that part. But he was just looking out like nobody's business. And I knew there was nobody supposed to be up here. I was the only one even up here that day. And I watched him. He looked out and he looked around, but then he looked over at me, and he didn't, like most trespassers, when they see someone, they're going to take off running, or they're going to try to get out and take off. You know, that's just what they do. But he didn't do that. He just kind of looked at me a few minutes, and I even yelled at him. I said, "Sir," and he just kept looking at me, and then he just turned around very nonchalant and walked back into the hospital from the window. And so the owner, I called him immediately. He was on his way up. And I called him. I said, "There's somebody in the building. I don't know who it is, but there's a man in the building." He said, "Well, you watch the end, and we're headed up the road right now." He said, "We'll be there within 2 minutes or less." So they were here in just a very, very short time. And he had another guy with him that worked with him at the time, and they went in and they checked the entire building. I was watching the outside of the building, and there was no one that came out of that building. And this guy was never seen again. And the funny part of it is, this is the same man that I've had so many people describe to me before I describe anything or tell them anything. I've had them describe this very same man to me, many people. So that's one of the coolest things. That was probably my earliest recognition of, that, this place was haunted. And so then after that, I become a tour guide and giving tours. I mean, of course, you're helping people look for things, and whether it happens or not, you can't control that. I love people that call me every day and ask me if I can guarantee they'll see a ghost if they come up here. That's a little hard to do because they don't work on command, trust me. But once I become a tour guide, and then it seemed like the most things that I was seeing in the building were children. I've seen full apparitions of what appeared to be an adult, but for the most part, it's been children. And I was giving a tour one day on the second floor, walking down, and my shoe had gotten untied. So I bent down to tie my shoe. And as I started to raise back up, I raised my head. I was still down on one knee, and I raised my head, and there was a child standing. I mean, its little face wasn't 3 inches from my face. And that I will never forget, never. And even another time on the 4th floor when I'm sending people down, because we like to engage our guests and send them down and let them try to have an experience as well. And after we had done that, I started down the hall, and I saw what appeared to be a little child just sitting in the middle of the hallway, kind of like crisscross applesauce, just sitting there, kind of minding their own little business. And I don't know how to describe this because it's never a bad feeling that you get, but it's like something kind of, I hate to say take you over, but it don't take you over, but for just a second, you're not thinking rationally. I guess that's the best way to say it. So I went down and reached down to pick up this child, which not normal people's going to do that. But I didn't realize really what I was doing. So as I reached down to pick up this child and got all the way down to where he was, and of course it was gone. There was nothing else there. So that one I'll never forget. But there's been so many times like that. And sometimes it's just, I mean, I can be sitting down here. We used to have tables and chairs down here. This was our welcome center when people would first get here. And I was sitting here one day talking to a friend, and we were both over here and minding our own business. There was no one on the other side of the room where the table and chairs were. But all of a sudden we heard, because it's a concrete floor, and when people would scoot their chair out, of course you could hear it squeaking. We heard that, and we both looked up and looked over there, and this chair just moved back from the table about 2 feet and just stopped. And we're just sitting there looking at it and looking at each other like, did you see that? Yeah, did you see that? And I mean, that was startling, to say the least.
So Brian, let me ask you, and then Shirley and I get your answer as well. When you're outside of Waverly Hills, like, removed from that area, have you ever experienced any of these same feelings or, seen things that were
a little different? I would say that personally, I've felt that feeling before in several different places that were, I guess you could say, similar, not the exact background with the tuberculosis or the hospital, but places where a lot of people had passed away. And so personally, I've never seen anything the stories that she's describing. I haven't been around long enough to have that background, but I did a tour over in Europe, and it was in Edinburgh, underneath the city. They had, they called them tombs, but they were basically built originally hundreds of years ago for merchant ships to bring in goods. And it was underground. That idea, a lot of the goods were food. It ended up spoiling everything. So they sat vacant for years. People would live down there. People would die down there. A lot of kind of morbid history. And so I went on a tour down there underneath the city of Edinburgh in the UK in these tombs. And it was a very similar feeling to what I felt last week at Waverly Hills. Although I will say that one was at night, and for Waverly to experience the same type of feeling in broad daylight, that was the most shocking part to me of going out there. And I think that it's one of those things, being an outsider who doesn't have this long decades of history in the place, to me, my goal was just to treat it like I would any other place that I respect. I wouldn't go into somebody's home and act a certain way. I wouldn't go into a funeral service at a graveyard and act a certain way. So I certainly wasn't going to do that in a place that had the type of history that Waverly Hills has.
Right.
And Shirlene, so for you, have you had those experiences?
Well, I have. Not a lot, but my house also has a spirit, if you will. I don't like the word ghost. I've never liked ghost. I like to refer to them as spirits. It's just my thing. But yes, I do have, well, my children, I've been there now for probably 35 years where I'm at now. And when the kids were little, they used to say they seen a woman all the time. And of course, I just blew it off thinking it's, children's imagination. They're just dreaming or whatever. And I never paid any attention to it until probably a good 10 or 15 years later. And then I started seeing it, and it's more of a residual type of entity, if you will. It's always going through the same area in the house, going to the same room. Every time I've seen her, she's been coming from my kitchen into my daughter's room every single time that I've ever seen her. And I haven't seen her in a while. She's welcome there. We've let her know she's welcome there. And it's funny because we used to find very strange things in our house, things that didn't belong to any of us. And that probably was the thing that probably scared me the most, is like, a shirt would show up in the middle of the living room floor. And it's like, this don't belong to anybody here. Or even, but brassieres have showed up in the middle of my floor. And it's like, they don't belong to no one here. So that used to happen. She does, for some reason, always go into my daughter's room. And she's very, she is very good at moving stuff. She likes to hide stuff. And my daughter had some stuff sitting on her dresser, and she had left to go to the store. And when she came back, she couldn't find it anywhere. And it had been moved into a little shelf on the side of her dresser, up behind a bunch of other things when she found it. And she would have had no reason to open that up and put that behind all of these, it was something simple. Like I think it was a candle. I want to say it was a candle. But yeah, stuff like that has happened in my house for, like I said, it's been a while since I've seen her. And, I say, yes, I've seen this, but to be very honest, I have seen her, but I would say, people come up here and they think they're going to see something every time they come in. And a lot of people do, but not everyone will. And this spirit that I have at my house, I have probably only seen her maybe 4 times in the 30 some odd years I've been there. So it's not real frequent. It's just she lets you know that she belongs there and wants to be there, and that's fine. We just deal with it.
So, Matt, I'm sure you have some questions. This is quite a interesting story.
Yeah, Shirlene, I was curious. You said your grandparents worked there and your father worked there, and they used to, hear stories and stuff. Do you remember what any of those might be, and if you found them to be true later on when you started working there?
Well, it's really funny because I'm dating myself here, but I was young, and at that time, children didn't listen to adult conversation.
Oh, I see.
That was just the way it was in my family. If the adults was going to talk about something like that, they would have sent the children outside. They would have never, talked to them in front of the kids. So I didn't hear a lot, but I will say none of them ever talked about anything with it being, and my dad he's gone now, but he's been gone about 12 years, but I was already up here and had been here a number of years before he passed. Mm-hmm. And, I've talked to him many times about up here, and he said there was some things occasionally that didn't make sense, but that's all he would say. He wouldn't go into detail. He wouldn't say what it was that didn't make sense. So, and my parents were kind of on the older fashion to where they didn't really, that was kind of taboo to talk about that kind of thing. So they didn't do that, on a very regular basis.
I see. How long was it empty before the people bought it in 2001?
I'm thinking it was something like 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And it had said here it was always owned. It was never just abandoned, and that kind of is not the term to use, but it's just that the owner didn't appreciate the building. He actually wanted it torn down.
Right.
He knew that this was prime real estate up here on this hill, so he wanted to sell it off for the real estate. After he was told that he couldn't tear the building down because it was on the National History Register, he was willing to get rid of it at that time. He didn't want no more part of it.
I see.
So it sat here for a number of years and because he didn't care about the building itself, he would just let the kids come up and hang out in the building, and they broke every window out, of course. When they closed this building down, from it being Woodhaven, it sat here just like it was being used. They did not take anything out of this building. The kids would come in, they broke up all the furniture, they broke up tubs, they broke up sinks, I mean, anything and everything. They let people come in and strip the copper out of the plumbing. So it was really, really in rough shape. They just didn't care about the building whatsoever. So at least the owners that bought it, they did have a heart and they did care about the building. And, for that, we're all grateful.
Is there one area of the building that is, there's more activity, I guess, than others?
I get asked that a lot, and I think that depends on who you're, and of course you're talking to me now, so I'll give you my opinion, but I say no. People say, where's the most haunted place in the building? It can be anywhere at any time, and you don't know. That's just it. One day you might be up on the second floor, which I have been because I do love the second floor, but I've been up there and had things happen, and then you may come in for a month every day and not have anything happen, but it may be happening up on the fourth floor. So it could be anywhere at any time. There's really no way to say this right here is definitely a hot spot. I mean, there's some spots that we probably have seen maybe more often over, if you took a poll of everyone that's been here.
Right.
And of course, the fourth floor, being the surgery and after surgery, you was held on the fourth floor. So either you lived or you died on that floor pretty much. So that is a very active floor. The fourth floor has always been known for that. But to me, it can be anywhere in this building at any given time.
So have you overnighted at the property?
Oh goodness, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was like, no, I'm not doing that.
No, I used to give overnight for our guests that would come in to investigate. So I've spent many nights in the building, but and it's cool. I mean, you'll sit there and you may watch shadow people down the hall. You might even see a full apparition. There's just, but you may sit there one night and see absolutely nothing. So, there's just no guarantees, and there's no guarantee on where or when.
Right.
And, you have to just let it happen when it happens. And I think we all know that are here now, and we respect that. And that's why we don't push people. And I always tell people on my tours, I respect your opinion. If you're not a non-believer, that is fine because, hey, I've been there. I was a non-believer myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of us that are here now was, at one time very skeptical about all of this. But after so many things keep happening that cannot be, and trust me, we do look. I will look for any possible reason for something happening before I say it was paranormal. We don't just jump and say, oh, my God, I've seen something that was paranormal. We do not do that. We actually investigate. Sometimes it was a car that went by.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was a motorcycle we heard down on the highway. You have to investigate things.
Right.
But there's so many things that could not be answered that you have to know there's something here.
So I assume you hear a lot of voices and that sort of thing? Just conversations?
We do hear muffled voices. Some of the things that I've heard most are children.
Mm-hmm.
I was given a tour one night, and a baby started crying. A baby.
Wow.
And I mean, it was right there in our group. Everybody was like looking at each other like and of course, we don't allow children in the building on the night tour, so there was no baby in there, but everyone in the group heard this baby. we hear dog tags or like a chain dragging, like a dog dragging a chain down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
That's another common thing that's heard in here. Oh my gosh, music, like old, especially where I'm at down here. I love this room because I guess because my grandmother worked here and I just feel so drawn to it. But a lot of times we'll hear like music box music, but it sounds like it's in a tunnel. You know, it's not like right here in your face. It's like a distant music box playing,
right.
And you just listen to it. You know, you might hear it 5, 6, 8, 10 seconds, and then it's gone. But, you know, there's nothing down here that's turned on. You know, there's just no explanation for it.
I was curious. I was reading about your father, and he worked on the body chute. What exactly is that?
He did. So there was a tunnel that they built because we do sit up pretty high on a hill. And back then, I mean, of course, right now, this is very, very populated. But at that time, this was very rural. Dixie Highway wasn't even paved. In fact, they paved Dixie Highway with the cinders that came from our boiler. So that's just another little tidbit there. But it wasn't even paved. It was just a little rock road. And they needed a way to get items up here, especially in the wintertime when they needed to bring supply up the hill. And not everyone wanted to come up here and deliver stuff. So they used that as a supply tunnel. They built it. It goes all the way down the hill, almost to the railroad tracks beside Dixie Highway. And that was a way that they could bring supplies up that was needed. However, when it did get so when tuberculosis was at its peak, they were losing easily a death an hour for years.
Wow.
And they needed another way to get these bodies out of here because we have a very large, what you call a solarium, which is like a big wraparound porch around the back of the building. And they would push the patients out. They would wheel them out of the room every day to sit out there on that screened-in porch to get sunlight, fresh air that they thought was going to be the cure. So all of these patients that were laying out there every day would see all of these hearses pulling up constantly, which was terrible for morale, as you can imagine. So they decided, hey, we can use that tunnel to take bodies down and they'll never see them leave. So that's what it turned into. It turned into a body chute, which was a cart that was connected to a motor, and they could lower this cart down to the bottom of the hill. And down there, they would take the bodies off. There was a table down there. My dad told me it was a 2-person table. It had a place to put 2 bodies. And then they would wait for a local funeral home if the family could afford a funeral. But these were Depression years, and not everyone could. So a lot of the bodies weren't picked up by family. So those bodies were loaded onto train cars down there. The train track actually had a stop at the bottom of the body chute. They could load those bodies on the train track. They would take them over to University of Louisville. They would take them over there, use them as cadavers, you know, in the search for a cure or whatever they needed the bodies for. And then, unfortunately, they would call my dad, and he would go back and pick them up, just, you know, bits and pieces and body parts. And they brought them back here, and they buried them in huge mass graves throughout the property. Of course, they are still here. They have never been dug up. No one has ever found them. I have been told where they're at, but I will take that to my grave just out of respect until they're dug up, and they probably will be before that time comes. But it's got quite a history.
That's a lot different than what I was imagining. I was thinking it was like sort of a log flume type thing where...
Right. Yeah, that's what, people that come up here, they say, oh, man, we want to slide down. Well, it's not like that. It is a gradual downgrade that, they were on a cart that was attached to a motor. So it's
It was interesting to see that. I saw it on my tour, and one of the things I thought about, because you can't see the end of it. It's that long. It's that dark down there. And they had told us on the tour that a nurse would walk and accompany the body on the cart down the chute. And so if we can't see the end of it, and it goes, it's quite a distance up and down stairs. And so to think about the not only the tuberculosis patients who had died, but the nurses who were working there day in and day out, who had to make that walk up and down that many times a day. That was one of the things that stuck by me. Looking down this chute where, she said some guests may want to slide down it, others stare at it and say, I don't want to go anywhere near that.
Exactly.
And for these people, that was their job. They had to do that every single day, multiple times a day.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the nurses' dorm, I think that's where they may have got misunderstood. But one of the nurses' dorms, there was a couple, and one of them was at the bottom. So all of the nurses that lived down there in that dorm would walk up that to work every day. If they took a break and wanted to go home, they had to walk all the way down that body chute and back up that body chute. And trust me, if you've ever went to the bottom and come back up, you know not to do it again. I mean, you just know.
Well, that made me wonder about the accessibility of the building. So for visitors, is it handicap accessible?
We are not handicap accessible. However, we do let people come if they have a wheelchair or scooter or whatever they're on, that they can have a friend carry for them up to the next flight of stairs. And if the person is able to get up those stairs with someone helping them, then they can come. Unfortunately, at this time, we still don't have any elevators working. That's going to be a little while longer, but hopefully it won't be too long that we can welcome all guests.
Okay. Do you have mediums that contact you to come there? And
oh my goodness, we get so many calls. I mean, you wouldn't believe, answering this phone for over 20 years, and some of the calls I get, and I never say I've heard it all now, because I bet I've said that 3,000 times. But yeah, you get some very strange calls, and we get a lot of people that come up here that say they're mediums, and they could be. I mean, that's not for us to determine, but we do get our share of mediums, psychics. We're kind of at the point now where we do get so many that we kind of take it with a grain of salt, because everybody that reads a book on, paranormal thinks they're a psychic. So, you kind of roll with that.
So on a percentage basis, how many or what percentage do you think come there for historical, just because the historical part versus the paranormal?
It's probably almost 50-50. We get a lot of people, especially not just younger, but we get a lot of people that are just coming to the knowledge of Waverly Hills that are definitely in it for the paranormal. After you've been up here and you've seen things, then it's interesting. You wonder why they're here. Then you start looking at, what it was like when they're here, and then that brings you back to the history. So I think most people that come up here, even if they're just for a good time, hope to see something or whatever, I think eventually those same people usually come back and want to know the full history of the building. So I would say it's about 50-50.
So Brian, how long did your tour last, and what tour did you sign up for?
So I was there for work. I was escorting the reporter and photographer team who were there doing live hits for their morning show. So I wasn't on a traditional tour that I did. I went with them and one of the guides, just kind of when they were finished with the television portion, they had asked, "Do you guys want to see the rest of the building?" And of course, everyone did. So I wasn't on one that was a classic sign up version, but it was almost it was a neat experience, because you could see how much the people who work there care about the history of it, because they didn't have to be doing this for paid ticketed guests. We were just there, and they wanted to share the excitement and the knowledge with us after the TV segment was over with. And it's funny listening to the description of how people come there, what their expectations are, what they want to see. I was almost identical to what you described. I was very interested to see the paranormal and the ghostly side of Waverly Hills. And after I finished on the tour, I immediately got on Google and wanted to look up all the history, because it was so interesting. So you will end up getting both. It's hard to imagine going there just for the Halloween experience and not wanting to take away the history afterward, because it is so interesting.
Exactly. It is.
Sure.
It really is.
So,
Shirlene, what do you guys have going on for Halloween? Do you have some special event going on?
We do. In October, we have our annual, it's our largest fundraiser that we give. Of course, every penny that we make up here, we're nonprofit, and it all goes back into the building. And right now we have our haunted house going on. And there's several different packages you can choose from. You can come up if you're just, a lot of the younger kids, they just want a good scare. And they come up and go to the haunted house, but a lot of their parents and grandparents, they want to see more. So they'll buy the next packet that lets them do a tour after they go to the haunted house. And then there's still another packet that gives them some extra perks along with that. So there's different packets you can purchase to come up. And that is on Friday and Saturday nights right now. And we open the gates at 8 p.m. and we close them at midnight. And we're always packed. But it's never a terrible wait, and it's always a good time. I mean, we have activities going on outside even while they're waiting. So, we care about our people. We really do. This is not just something to make a bunch of money. I personally don't care anything about the money. Honestly, I just want to share the love of Waverly Hills.
So how long does the tour last?
We have different lengths of tours. We have paranormal tours that are done at night. Those are generally on Friday and Saturday nights. We do them at 8, 9, and 10 p.m. And those tours last about 2 hours each, and they're $29 per person. Or if you want to spend a little more time and kind of have some free time while you're here, you can purchase a 6-hour investigation, and that's also on Friday and Saturday night from midnight to 6 a.m., and that is $90 per person. Now, if you're a group and you want the whole building to yourself, you can do that. We offer private investigations that'll give you the building in our normal season. October's a little different with everything because of the haunted house, but in our normal season, you could do that, and that is from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. I'd stop and think for a minute. So we do that as well.
And is there a certain number of people that would include?
Yes, for the private, there is. It is a group of 10 or paying the equivalent of. Now, we do have people that come up here with 1 or 2 and pay for the whole building, and that's perfectly fine as well.
Okay. And then, so if you just want the historical day tour?
We do that on a Sunday. We give a historical each Sunday. And then we give one through the week for people that are coming from out of town or just want to come and visit us through the week. It's either on a Tuesday or Thursday of each week, and we alternate between Tuesday and Thursdays.
Which is the package that lets me ride the body chute?
Just take an overnight, and you can walk at body chute all you want.
Are there any places that are off limits that you don't allow guests to go?
There is a wing of the first floor, a small portion of the building that is locked off, and that's just because they're still doing some maintenance and stuff down there, just taking care of the building that needs to be done. And there's a few rooms that they have storage in just for like our props and stuff from Halloween are locked up during the year.
Right.
So, but no, pretty much the whole building.
Is there anything else on the grounds that, because I know you mentioned like the mass graves and stuff, and are there other buildings that people explore?
There is not. This, unfortunately, is the only building left up here, the laundry room that's attached. And the building itself, and they're attached through a tunnel underground. Okay. But that's about all we have left of Waverly, and that's what we're trying so hard to save.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Kat, one more question.
So has anyone captured on video, photos, any spirits or something unusual?
Definitely. Oh, yeah. We get... We get a lot of pictures. We get a lot of EVPs. If you're not familiar with an EVP, that's an electronic voice phenomenon, and really that just means that a recorder can pick up sounds that you're unable to hear by just listening, and we get a lot of that. We get quite a bit of that in the morgue as well, and I will say that in the morgue, every time that I have caught an EVP in the morgue, there's always a whistling sound either right before or right after I get an EVP, which is so strange. Not sure what that is, but a lot of people get that. But we get pictures. I mean, there's so many of us up here that love the building, and any extra time that we get an opportunity to take photos, we do. And then we get a lot of people that come up and do overnights, and a lot of times they'll show us something on their camera, and we don't want people to say, well, they doctored that up. So we don't wait until they go home and have time to do something and send it back to us. We will actually ask them if we can take a picture right off of their camera. So we get it directly before they've had a chance to do anything to it. So we have some pretty interesting photos.
And so as we promote this episode, is there any promotional materials, photos that you could share with us that we could help to promote the episode?
If you want me to email you a few, I could probably do that. They're on my phone. I like to show them sometimes to our guests when we do tours and what have you. So, yeah, I'd be happy to send you a few of those.
Great. I think that would definitely, the listeners, I'm sure, would love to see some of the things that that different people or yourself have witnessed.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. I will send you some.
Well, this has been a great episode. We've been trying to focus a little bit on the backstories of tourism, and definitely Waverly Hills was one that we were hoping to be able to cover. So
we're so glad you did. We appreciate it, really.
Yes, this is very fascinating. Matt, I know that you can't wait to go down the body chute.
Brian, if you get a chance to do it before me, let me know how it goes.
I will. We might have to plan this one together.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Do you have your overnight tour scheduled?
I've got my bag packed.
Do you have your overnight tour scheduled?
I'm ready to schedule it. I got my bag packed, and I remember extra batteries. That was what they told the camera crew coming in.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it will drain your batteries. This is true.
I wanted to ask about that because I saw in some reporting of this where the journalist was saying that as soon as they went inside, the batteries, the microphone had died, and also to the camera.
Yeah. Well, the spirit is energy, and they have to gather energy to be able to do what they do. So even to manifest, they have to have enough energy to be able to do this, so that you can see them. So yeah, they will drain batteries from your cameras. You take in extra batteries. You definitely bring extra batteries because they will go through quite a few batteries while you're here.
See, I'm thinking these spirits are like in, cahoots with the battery company.
Right? That's not a bad idea.
A lifetime contract.
That's right.
Exactly.
Lord help you if you drive a Tesla.
A lifetime and beyond.
Well, thank you both so much for being our guest today.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, you can send those to Kat at iWritePlays@outlook.com, or you can write to me at backstorysessions@gmail.com or Matt at level11ventures.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.